And we've talked a lot on this show about, stretching versus not stretching versus, activation versus dynamic stretches versus doing myofascial release and this program and that program. And I liked a lot of the stuff that you had to say. I tried what you were talking about, and you were like, some people might be able to do, what you showed obviously was like next level. I wasn't able to even do that, but I was able to do a scaled down version of it.
What video is this?
And I'm just trying to move, my hip, just a hip flexor exercise.
Oh, the pike pulse, yeah.
I'm on the ground, and I just kind of lean back on my hands and then just kind of move my foot off the ground, I guess you'd say, with my leg extended out straight. I did like 4 reps. And I just got this crazy cramp in the hip flexor, and that calmed down, and then I got a cramp in my stomach, and then I like rolled over. I'm like, I'm getting my ass kicked. I haven't even tried anything yet.
Yeah.
Where did you come up with some of these ideas? How have you kind of stumbled upon some of this information?
Yeah, I mean, that was not me coming up. That was stolen, completely stolen. I mean, 99% of what I do is plagiarized. People got to realize that's the fitness industry. It's not like deceptive plagiarism.
You learn.
But it's you learn.
Yeah.
Something like the pike pulse, that comes from my lens, it comes from gymnasts. But a lot of martial artists use it as well. Like they train their hip flexors or doing that leg lift. They'll use it a lot in like judo warm-ups. They use it a lot in gymnastics as well.
Olympic lifting
as well, yeah.
The weight a lot of times.
Yeah. But yeah, specifically that pike pulse, I first heard about it from Coach Christopher Summer, who was the Team USA gymnastics coach many, many years ago. And he was talking about this, like, what is this exercise? And then he was talking about how humbling it is. Like, it looks like nothing. You're sitting there lifting your leg off the ground. How hard can that really be? But then when you look at it from like the physiology perspective, like, this is why biomechanically it's so fucking hard. I can swear, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. I can't remember. But I was like, it's fucking hard. And then you realize, this is why it is so hard. And then, because one thing is, you're putting your body into a very, very short position in terms of the muscle length, where you're not going to have a lot of strength, and you are going to have a heightened sensitivity to that crampy sensation, which is not the goal, but it can happen a lot of the time. Then I started to unpack it more, and then like I've been through every single type of fascial stretch, release, therapy thing, and I've had varying levels of success with it. And what I started to realize over time was that all of these things are improving flexibility, mobility. Not much is actually happening on a tissue level. And most of the research does actually show that, where like most of what we do, like stretching, mobility, soft tissue, you're not actually changing much of the tissue in terms of its quality or its texture or its length. Like there may be, with extended stretching for a long period of time, you are going to get some change to the tissue length from stretching that has been shown, but it's very minimal. But really the way that a lot of these stretching things work is nervous system. It's all the brain. Like your brain is down-regulating its feedback to say like, hey, stop going to that position. And we've got to work, okay, why are you tight in the first place? Has your muscle become so bound up and knotted up and tight? Actually, it doesn't just happen like that. And if anything, it's more the brain saying, I don't trust your ability to go there for whatever reason. So I'm going to create restrictions in your movement, which you'll sense as hamstring tightness or whatever. And then I'll restore that if I gain that confidence and awareness and whatever else it may be. Like something like the pike pulse, that hip flexor work, that works via more reciprocal inhibition, where in order to contract the agonist, like your bicep, your tricep has to relax. It's the same deal for the hip flexor hamstring. When you flex your hip flexor, your hamstring has to relax. So you have to feel the hamstring, well, the hamstring will loosen up. And for many people, you got to ask, like, why is the hamstring so tight? Like, is it because they're not stretching the hamstring enough, or is it because it's tight for a reason, because they're pulled in a certain position all the time, because their body senses whatever instability or weakness in inverted commas in that area, and how can we restore that? What's the missing link? And don't look at it from the tissue perspective of the hip flexor or the hamstring. Look at it more so from a neurological perspective of what does your brain not have good awareness, good control over, and then how can we restore that? Yeah.
What are some core principles? Like, for example, we're talking about individuals who, when they gain muscle over time, they become stiff, they become tight. So for you, you're large. Like, you have a lot of muscle. People can see it on your IG. You've been training for a long time. But what within your training have you maintained so that you have good range of motion, so that you don't get too stiff? Or are you stiff in certain areas? Do you feel like, because like with your training, you do a lot of different things. So how do you structure that for yourself? And what are you like, what do you do in terms of practice that helps you maintain good mobility, good movement while you're continuing to improve your physique?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for saying I have muscle. That's always nice to hear.
Everybody knows that.
Yeah. I'll look at myself like, these are leftovers, it's
leftovers from being bigger at another time, or leftovers from everybody else.
a little bit of
Christ.
both. I mean, like literally that. But you know, what people don't realize is that video there is I'm 66 kilos, or that's 140 pounds. Like it's for me. That's
Not natty.
The thing is, like, I've got really good muscle bellies, proportions, structure. Like, I was made to do bodybuilding. Like, not to be Mr. Olympia, because I don't have the height for that, but I have that physique that's just like, very pleasing to the eye.
Just hop on and go to 212s.
Yeah. The way my muscles, like, attached to my body, it just looks nice. It's always going to look, so I'm going to look a lot bigger than I actually am. Like, the first reaction people always have is like, oh my God, you're so small. I'm like, yeah, I am.
You're like,
I am.
thanks.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah, it's a big come down for a lot of people. It's like, yeah, it is what it is. Like, I know the angles, you know? I know the angles, I know the lighting. I'm very good at that kind of stuff. But to go to the question, you know, of training-wise, yeah, I've gone through many different iterations of training over the years where I've realized, like, some things, when I was, like, heavily into powerlifting, heavily into even bodybuilding many years ago when I was competing, I had a lot of restrictions in movement. I wasn't doing too well. And now that's very different. And I wouldn't say it's because I'm a lot smaller as to why that I am more mobile. I'd say that if I cared to put on that amount of size again, I could do that and maintain mobility or even improve it. Because if you look at, it's always, I don't like to always go to anecdotal evidence, say, look at these authority figures or whatever, but it is helpful. Yes. And there are so many people out there, even like a Ronnie Coleman, okay? He's, you know, a bajillion kilos in his prime. He could do the splits. Like, it wasn't a perfect split, of course, but you see so many examples of these incredibly muscle-bound people, but they can still achieve feats of strength, or feats of mobility and flexibility. And you got to understand, okay, what's really going on there?
Power Project family, how's it going? I hope you guys are enjoying the episode. And I want to tell you, sometimes when you're a lifter, you need certain pieces of equipment that's going to help you perform a little better in the gym. Just like the hip circle is going to help warm up your hips, knee sleeves are going to keep your knees warm when you're squatting. The slingshot's going to help you bench a little bit more. But the cool thing is that Mark made all of this equipment when he was in the middle of his powerlifting career, because he wanted equipment that could help him perform better, as it can also help you perform better. The cool thing is that all this equipment was made for lifters by lifters. Andrew, could you tell them how to get it?
Yes, that's over at markbellslingshot.com, and at checkout, enter promo code PowerProject10 to save 10% off your entire order. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes.
Like, is this whole muscle-bound thing a case where you have too much muscle, you actually can't scratch your ass because your lat's in the way? Honestly, it doesn't happen like that. Like, maybe if you're Ronnie Coleman, it might at that point. Yeah, it's crazy.
I didn't know that.
Well, like, if you actually really analyze that, is that really a split? It actually isn't really a split. Look how his left knee is bent.
Yeah.
It's actually, he's stretching out his right hamstring.
It's Ronnie Coleman.
Yeah.
We'll just give him the nod.
For sure.
Ronnie, that
sure.
is clearly a split.
Yeah. Regardless, it is still impressive.
Yeah.
You know, it is still an impressive position to be in given the muscle size. And it kind of shows you guys that, like, yeah, being muscle bound isn't necessarily going to be like the default if you build more muscle mass, you know? And you've got to ask, what is missing in some people when they do build muscle, they do build strength? What are the gaps in their programming? What are the gaps in their exercises that they choose that then leads them to eventually become muscle bound or they're tight? And that's where we've got to unpack all the way to the start and say, okay, what causes not even the muscle stuff, but what causes you to be tight in the first place? What causes your average Gen Pop person who weighs, you know, a whopping 70 kilos, 150 pounds, what causes that regular Joe to be tight and stiff? And how does that then translate to someone like us who's got more muscle mass? Because it's easy, it's the exact same process. People don't realize that, but it is the exact same thing, where it is all governed by the nervous system. Like, the reason why your desk worker has poor posture or whatever, it's because their nervous system hasn't been challenged to go to these different positions all the time.
Yeah.
It's the whole move it or lose it kind of thing. And the same move it or lose it kind of thing plays out with people who are very muscular, very strong. Just because you have muscle mass doesn't mean that you have acquired all the neurological skill set over all the different planes of motion. And if you look at like how we train, it's very sagittal plane.
Yeah.
Okay, it's front. We never go into the rotational, we never go into the transverse planes at all. And from a muscular perspective, that's huge. We're missing out on a lot of muscles, a lot of the rotator groups around the hips, around the shoulders. But also looking at it just from overall movement, joint motion as well, we're skipping over so much stuff. And it's not just that we're skipping stuff, it's that we're also overemphasizing certain things so much, where we're getting very, very, very good in different positions, in different ranges of motion. So of course your brain is going to really learn how to keep you in that mid-range.
Yeah.
Like if you look at most of the exercises that we do in the gym, it keeps us, we do the big compound lifts, help build muscle, build strength, which are very good for us, very good for a whole host of reasons, but they still have gaps. They still have gaps. And we need to look at it saying, okay, what is it from a plane of motion? Maybe it is getting out of that sagittal plane and more into transverse or more into the frontal plane as well. But it's also looking at it from the perspective of, are we actually going into those planes, other planes of motion, and challenging them and trying to gain strength and mobility and mastery in those positions? So I've identified that for myself and said, okay, here's how I can fix that. And it's quite simple. You know, a lot of it's simple. Like a big one that I've been working with the last few months that's on the top of my mind because I've been teaching it more in seminars on my traveling tour is like, say the shoulders, okay? Like the shoulder complex. A lot of people have issues with their overhead shoulder flexion
Yes.
position, right? And when you really look at it, you got to say, okay, how often do we really go into this overhead flex position in our training? And you say, well, yeah, we do. Like if you
Or
do,
just in life.
in life as well. And we say, yeah, we do that in, say, a pull-up. We're down here. We do this in the overhead press. Okay, like a thing that you can go, we do go there. But the real question is, are we actually in those positions? Are we being challenged to pull our shoulder back into flexion? And we're not. In an overhead press, you're pressing a barbell, the weight's pulling you straight down. It's not pulling you in this horizontal-ish whatever plane where you got to work on pulling back.
Yeah.
In a pull-up, okay, you're not being pulled back into that flexed position or into the extended position where you got to pull in the flexion. So technically what happens is, yes, in training, we train our shoulders. We train the upper back muscles. We passively go into a shoulder flex position by a chin up or by an overhead press, but we're never actively being pulled into this extended position where we have to work into flexion for the shoulders. And that's where we've got to look at just putting in an exercise, such as maybe like a face down trap 3 raise or whatever it is, or a cable raise, or even a face pull, you know, all these same exercises, because they're challenging you to actually go into the flexion position under load. And if you look at, like, that's a huge gap for a lot of people. And that's why, like, face pulls and exercise, hey, they're a cool exercise because it covers that gap. But then you look at it from the perspective of, okay, we have a face pull being a cool exercise that you can do. But then how balanced is that in someone's routine versus the overhead pressing, versus their bench pressing, versus their pull-ups, versus their rows? There's a huge disparity in the amount of volume and time they dedicate towards this face pull, shoulder flexion position, upper back stuff versus all the mid-range stuff. So for one thing, yeah, there's going to be changes in muscle size, but also just neurological awareness. Okay, where we're biasing one thing more, your body's going to get very, very good at that, and it will over time potentially restrict the range to other areas, just from a pure safety thing. Doesn't mean you can't build muscle, doesn't mean you can't build strength, but there's a good chance it's going to have some gaps there. So the thing that I say is, okay, look, what are those gaps? How can I fix them? With what exercise or what positions? And then how can I make sure that as I get better at my bench press or as I get better at my pull-ups, that I can maintain that? And it's surprisingly simple because I'm saying just like, yeah, let's do some face pulls. Great. But then for people like, well, I already do face pulls. Why does my posture suck so much? And that could be like the whole programming thing. Who knows? It's a very, very long conversation there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a big part of what you're saying is, you know, if you're going to do something like a bench press, if somebody has a decent amount of strength on a bench press, they're going to do many, many sets. They're going to do a lot of warm-up sets. And by the time they get to their top sets, if they're a strength athlete and they do like a 5x5, they just spend an awful amount of time doing an exercise that is just working, like, you know, I know it works other parts of your body, but mainly the front part of your body and only in kind of one direction. And it's like, how many face pulls, you know, do I need to do to kind of offset that?
Yeah.
And what I've been thinking about a little bit more, I mean, the answer would be like a lot, right? You got to do a lot of fucking reps and other exercises, right? To kind of offset it.
Yeah.
But what I've been thinking about a lot more is like, wow, if we just like run and we jump and we throw, like running, jumping, throwing, skipping, all these things from just that have been around forever. A lot of these things can help solve a lot of issues, you know, especially something like throwing, you're pulling the arm back.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's like an eccentric, concentric component to it. Even just throwing a med ball, you know, just doing stuff that's more sport related, I think can really help a lot of people just to kind of think about, there's a lot of deceleration that happens, a lot of explosiveness. And I think, for most of us, like we want to like look good, we want to be in shape and all that, but we want to be able to like move well too, be able to snap into something.
That's the thing.
Hey guys, I've seen that you guys have been commenting about how much you hate the whispering outro, asking you to like, comment, and subscribe. So I'm going to whisper again because I know you don't like it. So hey, I know we're bringing you some good content. So like, comment, subscribe, and share it with some friends so we can all help each other out. And maybe I'll stop whispering in your ear. Bye.